Well, good morning, everyone. It's Friday morning here, just after 9 o'clock. Um, just finishing up a sermon on 1 Timothy 5, and we're going to deal with the topic that maybe we haven't, or I should say it this way, I hadn't probably thought enough about, maybe you hadn't either, is this idea of widows. What is the church's role in that? What is our individual responsibility in that? And so we're going to talk about that. I always look forward to Sunday mornings, and I still do. It looks different, obviously, but I like knowing that when I sit down on the couch with my family and our dog jumps up and the four of us are sitting there and we turn on the video, that I know that we're all together worshiping, that we're opening scripture together, and that we're continuing to seek God in these days. It could be so easy for us to just say, you know what, we'll just check out for a couple of months, we'll reinvest in church when we can do church normally again. But I just know that there's so many of you that are committed to your own spiritual growth in this, and not just privately or individually, but you're wanting to do this corporately in some way. So that really encourages me. Usually with these videos, I give you a little bit of scripture and give you a couple of thoughts from that passage, and then give you an update with what's going to happen. But this morning, I just want to talk about something that I've been dealing with in my own life and challenge you with that. I've been reading a book by Tim Keller called Counterfeit Gods. Finished it up yesterday afternoon. And it's for seminary that I'm reading it, not for a specific class, but for the overall program. There's a number of books over a couple of years that we have to read. Some of them are just very practical in our ministry, and some of them are just really engaging for our minds and our hearts and convicting of various things. And in this book called Counterfeit Gods, it's about things that replace God in our lives. So essentially idolatry, things that become idols in our lives. And Keller talks about it in a sense of saying that a lot of these things are not bad things. Some of them are good things. But he says anything that becomes an ultimate thing, that's how Keller words it, an ultimate thing moves God out of the picture, and whatever that hobby or career or whatever it is, it takes place and it becomes the most important thing. It's where we find our identity, that's where we find our meaning and our purpose. And he says those things need to be dealt with because we can't find those things apart from God. He talks about it in the sense of you can't just, when you realize you have an idol, you can't just eliminate it, but you have to replace it. And that sounds interesting, but it reminded me back to a book that I read a number of years ago. I don't remember the book or the author, but the gist of what I read was that everybody worships something. It's not a matter of if you worship, it's what you worship. And that's what Keller's trying to get at here, is he's trying to say if you realize there's an idol in your life, it needs to be rooted out, but you can't just take it out. He says you have to replace it. And ultimately, the only thing you can replace it with that will last and will have meaning and satisfy is God. And so he deals with certain idolatry things in our culture and in our lives. And some of them are obvious, right? Money and prestige, fame, whatever. Those are kind of the normal things that we read in there. But he talks that one chapter is about the political side of things and how politics can become an idol in our lives. And man, I've seen that to be true in this North American context that we find ourselves in, where politics is as divisive and as people are just eager to fight and argue about it, and I found myself sometimes getting a little too worked up over it, and I'm not saying politics doesn't have a place or isn't important, but it should not become an ultimate thing, and sometimes it has. There was one specific chapter I read through about 2/3 the way through the book, and as I opened the chapter, I didn't really think much of it because I wouldn't have thought of myself this way. But as I started to read through it and consider it, I started to realize some of that was in my heart. And it was a chapter on the idolatry of greed. And I wouldn't have defined myself as a greedy person. But as I read through it, I was really convicted by, man, there's some things in my life where I wouldn't have said it consumed me or I thought about it all the time. But I started to realize that maybe I think about it too much. And it creeps into my thinking too often. And it needs to get replaced, not rooted up, but replaced, and replaced with God, that He's sufficient. And so I just want to challenge you with that, is what in your life right now has become an idol for you? Could be social media. We have many of us anyway, have a little bit more time, a little bit more free time on our hands, and maybe you're finding yourself going to social media often, and maybe with Corona stuff, you're trying to research and find out numbers and specifics, and you just want more and more information, and it's consuming you, and you're actually finding yourself, when you have any free time, that's where you go to. I would say then that's an issue. Another thing, and this kind of came to me in a conversation as well as something that I thought of in the book as I was reading, is we're a people that are used to being busy, right? Like our lives are so hectic and chaotic. And what Corona has done for many of us is it's slowed the external down, and so we're stuck with the internal, and we got to be stuck in our own heads. And so we're finding things to do. I got to clean this again. I got to reorganize the garage. I got some more spring cleaning to do. I'm going to clean that again, even though it probably doesn't need it, because we're just used to being busy, and we need to be busy. And maybe busyness is an idol that we need to deal with. I don't know what the specific thing is in your life, but I would challenge you that most of us now have more time than we ever have to read Scripture and to pray and to really work on our Christian development. Like we looked at a couple weeks ago, is we got to train ourselves for godliness, according to Paul and Timothy. And so the only way we train ourselves is by intentionally doing things. And to train means practice. And we have more time to do that now. And so I just want to challenge you to evaluate your own hearts, your own lives, and see what are the things that are have become ultimates in your life that have pushed God to the side. Don't just try and root those things out, but replace those things with God, because God's the only thing that will satisfy. As always, if you have any needs of any kind, if you need prayer, whatever it might be, please get a hold of me, phone, text, email, whatever, and we would love to just pray for you and figure out how we can meet whatever needs that you do have. Looking forward to Sunday with you, 1 Timothy 5. It'll be a good passage for us to study together. God bless. Looking forward to connecting with you again.